Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast about the Azure news and what it is for this week with updates. With me, I have my partner in crime, Andrew. How are you today?
I am really good. Thank you so much for having me, Marcos. Pleasure to
Yeah,
be with you again.
it's nice. I have to say that is the way that we receive our feedback of this new model of weekly being talking about all of these updates and new features and enhanced features that Azure have is being greatly. Thank you very everyone for giving me that feedback. I hope that you like it. We will be here every single week, me and Andrew. Sometimes I will try to invite um, other um, other professionals that they work on the field to give their vision of what is coming on Azure and what is that going to impact in this case your organization and how is those features can help you utilize even more the cloud. So we have the our source of truth is the Azure blog, the updates.
Mhm.
We left last week while we were recording this session. They released a new update. This is how fast they have. This week we only identify four new updates that we thought that was important to bring it, and one of them is they introduced this on the Ignite 2020. That is the Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare.
Mhm.
Um, it's an interesting concept. What is your first impressions now that is available on the markets, Andrew?
So, for me, when it first came out, the way I read it is it sounded a bit like it was kind of modeled the same way as Azure Government. And I think, when we chatted about that, we kind of came away from reading the initial article thinking that it was like a fully segregated data center physically. And we did learn something about that, yes. And we learned that, in fact, it's not completely separated, but it is definitely isolated, and there's a focus on increased security. It's a much more secure computing environment and analysis environment. So within that, we have kind of the platform and the infrastructure. So everything's encrypted physically as it comes through memory, a disk, memory, transit, and processor. All through that whole process, there's encryption in place. So that's what makes it a little bit more special, I think, for healthcare.
Yeah.
Really helps with all of the complex compliance requirements that are in healthcare today across not just North America, but worldwide. So I think Azure's gone a long way with that. It definitely, as we know, it takes a lot of compute calculations and processor cycles to handle that heavy encryption that's needed for compliance in all those areas.
Yeah.
But on top of that, we were also talking a little bit about this release. There's some other things that kind of come along with just the security pieces. So, HealthBot was something that really jumped out at me. And actually, I'm really proud of the fact that Microsoft took a lead with that. So, they deployed thousands and thousands of these automated chat bots to help with COVID diagnosis
Yeah.
and stop people from flooding emergency rooms and COVID testing centers. And this is worldwide. Everybody, this affects everybody. It doesn't matter if you're out at the cottage or in a big city. It doesn't matter where you are. You're impacted somehow now by COVID-19. So it's a big deal. And the fact that Microsoft dedicated resources, secure resources, and has really been empowering different healthcare agencies around the world to try and reduce the physical load of people congregating in one area for testing and all those things. That's a big deal.
It
Um,
is.
I, it's really cool that
It,
they were so fast with it as well.
yeah, I agree. And I was talking when this release, after this release, I was talking even with you offline and with other MVPs as well and other professionals. And what is exciting about this is like you mentioned. I got an impression that during Ignite that this was a kind of a segue of, like you mentioned, of the Azure government. It is a totally different physical location of Azure. They are not, or at least this is not. We don't know that. We
But
cannot
that's true. We're not allowed to go and just demand a tour of a data center. Although,
exactly.
Mr. Rasanovich, please, we're open to that.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to contribute or if you participate in this podcast, be my guest. I'm more than welcome to participate on that and to clarify us. But in this case, what I like about this is a bunch of services basically.
Hmm.
If I can resume that it's a very nice article, talks about the innovation that Microsoft is having. And if you follow us at at YouTube, you seeing our screen, and follow us on all of that. And one of the good things about this is that it talks about the Azure APIs for the fast healthcare interoperability resource. And this is basically what I was saying, that after reading this and after talking with a friend of mine that they are more into the healthcare, using all of these services, it's basically locking down all of the past services that they are behind it, and probably they are on a different type of subset of hardware. We don't know that because that's the beauty of the cloud. But it's way more locked down. It's like kind of a reserve computing, a reserve part of Azure, if you can say so, that allow them to just ingest data on a different ways that we, outside of Azure, Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, we do, for them to process, following the usually the IPA compliance and all of that, right? But
Exactly.
it's more like more dedicated service for all of this. And this was during the pandemic, that we had that we had the notification. I got the notification a little bit earlier, regarding an MVP, but under NDA I cannot discuss all of those things. But it's very impressive because we don't know if was really during the pandemic that they kind of flipped that switch. They saw the opportunity of innovation, or more innovation on Azure, and they are leading this. This is the part that I love about our job. It's every single day, it's a different way to do it. When this being released, I don't know if they are still counting votes in US, or not, but it will help them, in this case, to doing all of these healthcare and all of these services, right? I think
Yeah,
it's really special to do that.
yeah, and my takeaway for that is, this is something that's going to, I think, filter out, to other business models as well, not just isolated within healthcare. So as we have more and more personal data that's already in the cloud, people are becoming more aware in general, and they read about these data breaches. So people are much more concerned with encryption of data, security of their personal data. So it's not just within healthcare. Certainly, we have a much bigger scope overall. But I thought it was just a really cool thing. And certainly, launching the bot service throughout the pandemic, and taking advantage of all of the AI power that's within Azure. So, we're gonna talk about one of the other news updates later, but it's about getting the data in
Yeah.
to your tenant in Azure, and then really taking advantage of the scalable cloud computing and processing model. So, again, with other business models, we have different types of data and different ways we want to utilize it. But really, the needs are quite common across many businesses. So you
Yeah.
want to secure it, you want to get it, collected, get it ingested into your Azure tenant, and then store it, process it, analyze it, and do things with it, generate some actions out of that.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of commonalities, and I think that, the steps. I think we talked after our last recording last week when we were looking at this release. I was excited about some of the IoT parts of it.
Yes.
So I think of my life with COVID changes now, right? So being able to track movements through buildings, especially in very large buildings, right? So here in Calgary, I think of plus 15. So imagine the kind of cleaning regimen that everybody has to go through, those staff now, disinfecting, spraying handles, wiping things off, the floors, like I always think of the poor sneeze guard on the salad bar. I guess now we get to joke. Can you imagine people used to go to a salad bar together? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's interesting because all of this on healthcare, usually when we have this conversation and in a lot of the customers that we've been working together, when it talks about healthcare, we're talking about patients' information and the dangers of that information just going out of the world, right? Like you mentioned, this is probably a dedicated infrastructure. We don't know that, but certainly it's a new way of service that Azure provides and allows them to interact with all of those, like you mentioned, IoT devices. It's not only for that, it's like even to help them to process. Imagine one of the things that they open, and they mentioned over here in this article, that the medical image service for DICOM, that is open source, is a streamlined process that they basically doing all the ingesting medical imaging data into cloud, and they can basically get all the power, because usually those machines that you're doing the CCAN, CTKs, or whatever, the MRIs that we're
Exactly.
talking. I'm not a doctor. I apologize for that. But all of those things, using the power of the cloud, it will help them even to reduce the time of diagnostics and help everyone's. So it's basically straightening up what they have on every single healthcare healthcare hero, right? To just help them to just magnify that. Even on other things, if you read the article with the genome, that they want to decodify the genome and everything else. And even on the vaccines, if we saw all of that leading on innovation, it's really powerful. And that's let's jump to the second one, with this innovation one, that is the part of Microsoft regarding Gartner 2020 Magic Quadrant. It's one of the leaders regarding industrial IoT platforms. And that's reinforced what we are talking about this innovation, about the way that Microsoft is seeing that the cloud, especially Azure, it's built all for this, right? And that's the part that it really embraces. On the last episode, we talked about IoT, especially on buildings, on smart buildings, and it's a very good way that they, a few days after that's coming on this podcast right now, on this week, they are reinforcing that, and especially again with a lot of COVID. So apparently, regarding technology speaking, and I apologize in advance from what I was about to say, but COVID, it's good in our industry, right? It's been a disrupting way, and a good disrupting way to promote innovations, to promote other areas that probably they will take longer to get there, right? And this, it's another way just to see it, that how Microsoft now is one of them. And if you see the other partners, for example, we are not here to bash any other uh, um, company, but it's interesting to see that, for example, the other big cloud partners, or not cloud partners, the cloud providers, they are a little bit away from them.
Well,
And
they're in that niche players category,
exactly,
right? So they have a very specialty offering
yeah,
that really speaks to a very specific category where Microsoft, as a leader, has met all of the Gartner requirements to elevate them a little bit higher and put them in there. So it's important to note that Microsoft in that leader category is not the top performer. So we're not going to, really endorse other brands, but we are going to say that it's important that we know that there's different offerings out there for different niche needs,
exactly,
and it's you're the same as myself. It's always about choosing the right option for the client, and in this case, we're talking about industrial IoT. And definitely Microsoft has gone to great lengths to perform across a wide band of categories very, very well.
yeah,
So like we talked in the healthcare one a little bit about IoT as well, and we talk about data collection, and I think Microsoft has done a very solid job, especially emphasizing it through the whole COVID challenges. They've retained the focus on digital transformation, and they do talk about that throughout this article. That we've actually accelerated digital transformation. It's the same that you were talking about. So the whole pandemic challenges that everybody's had, different businesses and different people, different technology users, um, everyone has really accelerated in the digital transformation. And Microsoft has been supporting that, especially through industrial IoT. So one of the things as you may remember, I have some manufacturing background from, I'm going to say a few years ago. First, I worked in the steel industry, and then I worked in solid wood furniture. And I've seen different manufacturing lines. I've had my hands on product, and I think I have a bit of a different understanding than some people in technology that just approach it from a strictly analysis view. So it's kind of fun for me when I see different ways of data collection and really analyzing how we can accelerate, how we can scale production methods and make the business more efficient. That's really exciting for me, right? So, we think of I think of Kanban methodology where we make minor changes constantly to improve. So it's always about continuous improvement, minor changes, always tweaking, always improving, and getting better. Now we can measure those things really well. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm going to say 99% of cases I think can be monitored using some kind of data now, and we can actually measure the results of changes, minor changes. So it doesn't come down to you or I sitting with a spreadsheet looking at data. We can get it into Azure. And again, here we are with IoT data collection. Once it's in our Azure tenant, now we have a good data set. We can actually apply analysis, reporting, alerting, all of the things that we need. But now it's even so much cooler that I get really excited about this, because now we take those data and we say, okay, so, Andrew made this change on this machine at this time, and we noticed that production decreased slightly down the line because something else, it led to a different change.
yeah,
So now you can send a signal back to the machine and automatically revert that change.
yeah.
So there's really cool things that we can do to optimize performance in an automated and scalable way. It's fully scalable. It's so exciting for me. I'm sorry, I kind of hijacked your conversation.
No, that's okay, because one of the things that when talks about industry or industrial IoT, and this is one of the topics that I like to talk with you and Georgia, for example, is I like the way that, for example, AMG, the Mercedes AMG, the performance part of Mercedes, they do all of these big data analysis, IoT, and everything else that they are doing. Because if you are a petrol head like me, and you like all of those details, and if you are able to visit the factory, for example, you will see that, for example, on AMG, um, they record the pressure that they are tightening the screws. So they have a machine that they have everything by getting the data. Say even that screw, everything it's with tagging, with IoT device. Everything else it just basically goes, and they have the policy of one man, one motor, for example. So the same person that starts things to build the motor ends to build the motor, in this case, for example, and they will know if that setup, like you mentioned, that you would just, for example, by whatever it is, the pressure of tightening that screw will interfere or not on the longevity of the motor or even the performance, right? And that's one of the reasons, for example, that right now Mercedes on F1 it's so ahead of the competition,
Mm-hmm.
and because of that, because of all of that way of collecting data, processing the data, spitting out all of those configuration setups and everything else, that will make them um, way more efficient, because it's all about efficiency at the end, if you look it right. Talking about efficient, and we already been on long on this topic, uh, comes another one of the announcements that now we'll have another Azure PowerShell module, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's right up our alley. And I already assume that we're going to talk forever about this topic. I don't know why. I have just an impression
Okay,
because
so yeah, we get a little excited about PowerShell between the
yes,
two of us, right? And when we think about automation and we think about Azure Migrate,
right,
I mean, oh my gosh. So we're kind of a little bit in heaven. So thank you, Microsoft. but
yeah,
this is a really important announcement as well. So it's not just exciting for you and I. Azure Migrate has been a solid tool for a few years now, right? So I know for at least 3 years, it's been really dialed in. It's worked well, and they continuously, like everything in
it's
Azure.
reliable, it's stable,
Exactly.
and
And
and yeah, and that's, I think that is the important part, to talk about Azure Migrate. And I'm a huge fan. I've been talking about Azure Migrate on I don't know how many years already. I think I influenced you as well, on not on last Ignite, but on last physical. I don't know how to say it, the physical Ignite
Mhm.
2019. I had two sessions of talking about this as well,
You-
um,
yes.
and I'm really passionate about. And this is a preview, so it means that it's brand new stuff. It's not in haste, and yeah. Uh, at scale Azure migration automation with Azure PowerShell, the new module that they are doing, and they even provide some sample codes that I already start to use on my lab, and oh my god, the yeah, it's
Yeah,
powerless.
because before our recording session, I actually did already go to GitHub and I grabbed some samples and some code because well, let's be honest. It's nice to talk about technology, but I can openly admit for the whole internet here, I'm a hands-on guy, and I need to use these things
Yeah,
for me to really learn and understand them. And that's one of the awesome things. I talk about it a lot on my own blog, separate, but it's something I did learn with you together and I've taken away is, Azure gives us this opportunity to work on things for free. We get the Azure trial. We get the opportunity to go in and, get our hands dirty, play with things in a non-production environment. And if we make a mistake while we're learning, well, that's okay.
yes,
That's how we're going to learn from it.
Yeah.
And I know I don't want to get too sidetracked from news, but I think it's important to say, that we can go hands-on and we can practice and we can be destructive in a non-impacting way, right? So we can, what happens if I just delete this running production server in my test environment kind of thing, right? And, we can see what happens, but it's also a good way to get in and do testing
Yeah.
and learn new technologies like PowerShell Azure Migrate module.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give a foundation. So if you're not familiar with Azure Migrate as kind of a tool, there's kind of two modes. So first, you have to put it into your what I'm going to call a non-Azure environment. So you can install it in AWS. You can install it in Google Cloud, on-prem. Doesn't matter. As long as it's an environment that's got a Windows platform, you can install on a server. Like you install the image. You and I have done lots of VMware migrations, and you stand up the server. You can do agent or agentless. So agentless is fun, really easy. You do lots of collection. You get all kinds of data, and you can analyze. And
Yeah.
you can bring physical machines using an agent mode for Azure Migrate. But really, just kind of as a very light, high level kind of a background, it's a tool that you put in your non-Azure environment, and it allows you to upload whole servers, whole VMs or physical, and put it into Azure. It doesn't mean you flip it over right away, but you are ingesting that data and uploading it to Azure in your Azure tenant. So now, not having to do necessarily graphical stuff, we can do some PowerShell stuff. So I smell a demo coming up in the future for sure. Uh, Probably.
I smell more like a nice conversation only about talking about Azure Migrate and all of those components. One of the things that I've been able to play with this since it's been released, and it's been released only a few handful days
Hmm.
ago, is basically doesn't change much on Azure Migrate. So Azure Migrate did change a few months ago a lot
Yes,
on
there
the
were some big
version 2, let's
upgrades.
call it this way, on the version 2. Um, it's been always based on ASR, the ASR part of it of Azure, but is one of the components that I like, and this is where again, this is preview. Okay, this is not like, we are not saying that go to the GitHub, starting to download that code and starting to do it, because there are a few things that you need to be careful with. First of all, is preview, and
That's
by
true.
again, preview means that they're gonna change. Okay, it's not
Non-production.
supportable. It's not supportable in production because it's not production ready, and when it comes production, probably you need to redeploy everything again. This is our experience with preview, but it gives you the taste what is coming, and it gives Microsoft the way that you can report some bugs, for example, and make even more this more powerful
Mm.
for the future. That's the beauty of the previews, right? But there
Yeah.
are a lot
So.
of things that this um, it's allows you to do. So one of the
Mhm.
things that Azure Migrate does, and I love that part, is the discovery, and the part that gives you all that insight on what are you migrating from, doesn't matter what, right, to Azure. So like you said, Hyper-Vs, VMwares, physical machines, other clouds, it doesn't matter what is the source, the end is going to be Azure.
Mhm.
And all of this is based on that. So what I like about this is you can install this Azure PowerShell module, that is the Azure Migrate PowerShell module. The way that works is the way that we love it. We have a spreadsheet, so you can extract the spreadsheet from the Azure model migrate. Okay, you can download that spreadsheet. It's I don't know if you already saw the difference between the spreadsheet that they already produce or they are looking for and the spreadsheet already compared, so there is no much of a difference of a work that you need to do it. So that's a good thing. That's a good, for
Mhm.
me, it's a
It'll
plus.
it'll
It's
be
a
relatively familiar. So if you understand Azure Migrate, then in the graphical sense, I guess I should say. So if you understand the graphical previous way they've implemented Azure Migrate, then it's going to feel much more natural moving to PowerShell. So one of the cool things that I like about this, of course, discovery. I have to jump on that train. That's a big deal because now I did want to talk a little bit. I want to rewind. So do you remember years ago, we implemented Azure Migrate as an emergency kind of a DR method. So we used the Azure Site Recovery, the ASR,
yeah.
that underlies it, kind of powers Azure Migrate for us. We utilized that, and we gave kind of a medium, large size business instant DR protection
Yeah.
from their initial data center up into Azure. And that's really, well, I don't know. I get excited. It's a bit magical because,
Yeah. It
you know,
is.
it gives us the power of Azure. And I remember you helped me with that. That was one of my first big implementations with it. And it was this pressure kind of off my shoulders, right? So now we know, okay, so we have everything replicated up to Azure. So if everything can go sideways from on-prem or whatever your situation is, you now have a way to restore machines into Azure. Uh, of course, that is the purpose of doing Azure Migrate. But when you use it as kind of a sideways with ASR, it also provides a bit of a way to reduce your stress and stop so many gray hairs. So,
What I like about this is start like we mentioned with ASR, right? And now we're
mhm.
starting to deviate a little bit more the conversation to that, but starts with ASR. And the part of ASR, it was a tool that was built for disaster recovery mainly. Okay, that hence the name Azure Site Recovery, right? It starts, if you're going back on this, it starts with Hyper-V Recovery Manager. That was the starting. This was in, if I'm not mistaken, 2013, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken. At that time, I was one of the first ones to use it because being an Hyper-V MVP at that time gives me that possibility of using this as a beta tester at that time. And since then, if you see, that's why this is dear to our hearts with Azure Migrate, and especially with PowerShell, because to be very honest, with the enhancement and evolution of ASR, in I think it was last July, if I'm not
mhm.
mistaken, that becomes the Azure Migrate version 2. That is another big enhancement. But there was always one part that for us that we like to automate, and we're doing thousands of these migrations already. It was missing. That is the part of be able to automate, be able to any part of the part going to Azure PowerShell in this case, and be able to start the replication, to configuring, to doing whatever we want to do it, besides those bunch of jobs that we used to use, that we need to use the GUI. Because right now, for example, and this is the beauty of this is, if you are familiar with Azure Migrate, even on the last version, you still need to go to the portal to kick off and to implement all of that, and to have all of that really scoped and everything else. Usually you have a spreadsheet, right? With all of those machines that you are grouping up, and you want to do it, and you want to, based again on a discovery or not, it doesn't matter, right? This
Mhm.
allow us to spend time offline, in this case, on those on those X files, right? Excel files in this case, um, and be able to do this. And even during like Friday night, connecting to my phone, right? Connecting to the cloud using Azure PowerShell in this case, or even Azure the Azure PowerShell module, to just be able to start the replication remotely. So because it's going to be really difficult. I tried that to start the replication um, through the phone, right? Because it's so many steps that you need to follow regarding the GUI, that this
Yep.
allows you to be automated. It's not even that. It might sound that I want to be lazy or I want to work after hours or whatever it is, but it is not that. It's like allow us to just kick off this with automation. So allow
Well,
us
but
to
that's
kick
part of
off
the
this on
reality.
this, right?
Yeah, so that's something that we have to deal with as administrators, hands-on doing things. So we have to do a lot of these kinds of things after hours. So the ability to pre-write a script, have it ready to fire, and then go in off our mobile while we're out for dinner with a friend or family, say 7 p.m. or something on Friday. That's your time you're allowed to start your replication, or business has died down in the office and people have gone home. So then you can start to load your connection a bit heavier.
Yeah.
So that's just part of what we deal with. I think you and I, we get used to it. And somebody, a client says, okay, so Marcos, can you help us on Friday afternoon with this? Yeah, sure, no problem.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of other people, well, I want to go to the golf course, or go for a hike or something. But that's just part of our role as, I don't know, technologists, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
we have to work a lot of times when everybody else goes home, because a lot of what we do can impact the way that the rest of the company or the rest of the office works. So it's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
We accept that at the start.
Yeah, and allows us to be way more efficient, because usually you don't want to because if you are using Azure Migrate, and this is another way that I'm already starting to thinking on the customers that I've been implementing this, or I'm implementing right now, to say to them, hey, look, we can be way more efficient, because as everyone knows, if you are familiar with Azure Migrate, especially the part of synchronization, like you mentioned, it's the first part of the first synchronization is the most hardest one, because
It
you
is
are
so much
basically
data.
it is you are basically lifting what you have on the VM on prem to the cloud. So we're talking
Yeah.
about gigabytes of data, terabytes of data,
And it's not
depending
just the
on where it
network
is.
part, right? It's also the processing, because
So
it has to read the
yeah,
VM or the physical, and it's doing a lot of processing and blocks. It's making the blocks of data to send to your replication server to then
yeah.
replicate up to Azure.
And
So
it's not only that. It's like when you finish, you don't know if you when you finish, either that you are going to the portal and started to refresh and refresh
exactly.
and refresh, and oh, he finished right now. So with this, one of the beauties of this, especially in automation, is I can schedule, I can starting to see, because again, it's PowerShell model is a specific PowerShell model, starting to see when it finish, to kick off the other one, the other group that I need to synchronize. So
Exactly. Yeah, we
thousands
can
of the
really automate the
VMs.
whole chain. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not like I need to be there looking at the progress bar, because yes, we have, I don't know how many years on IT, and if I got like a dollar for any progress bar I've been watching for the last 20 years, I'll probably be playing golf with Bill Gates. Um,
It's true, but so this helps move forward again, right? It's another step forwards,
yeah,
moves more to automation, and helps reduce that hands-on touching. So no longer do you have to sit and watch the progress bar. I mean, I suppose you could, cheers with a cup of coffee and such, but
exactly.
sometimes it's nice to have a 5-minute break. We can all agree on that. But other times, you're trying to stagger these jobs. So you may have multiple data centers, multiple connections, replication servers, all these things. Depending on how you're scaling things out, you can schedule a little bit of PowerShell.
Yeah.
And now it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to make Azure Migrate even more powerful. I didn't even think it was possible, but here we go.
Yeah.
So one of the things, I know we've talked about this so much,
Yeah.
but there is samples that they've already published. So out of the Azure blog, there's
Yeah.
code samples on GitHub. And I was just reading now, there's actually a full tutorial on using the Azure PowerShell to automate migration of VMware virtual machines into Azure.
Yeah.
So using this brand new module, now preview, I think we should emphasize it's in preview.
A lot. Preview.
Yeah.
and even if you go into the samples, and we can go there on the samples, even if we're going on the samples, they really say that there are a few things that you need to see it. So the current limitations, for example. So this script supports VMware VMs, for example, with all the disks. But it's based, again, like we were talking about, on the Azure Migrated Discovery part, what they call the assessment recommendations. So if you don't do the assessment recommendations, basically all of this is going to be either standard or premium disks. And then it's up to you to just starting to change. So it's highly recommended that you're going on this. You have a lot of scripts, as you can see over here on this, and we already starting to deviate a little bit more about these news, but it's us, right? We cannot be on this is really informal, nothing scripted, as you can see it already, or get used to that.
Yeah.
It's all of those. So I highly recommend those. Again, those are samples just for you to see it, and that is in preview. Okay.
Yeah. So it's similar to the graphic implementation of wow. I almost wanted to say ASR. It's not Azure Migrate. So similar to the graphical interface when you're deciding on the levels of hardware and storage that you're going to use, please do not just next. Don't accept all of the defaults. Read them, understand what's in your spreadsheet, and take the time to go through it so that you can configure things correctly. So it gives you an opportunity right at the start. And you know what? I would say like 80% of the time, you have to go back and adjust a bit later on because there's little differences. But it's so easy to spec a machine up. Why start at the higher cost items? Start a little bit under because one of the things I learned, especially from moving from on-premises virtual to Azure virtual, was 2 processing cores on-prem is not necessarily equal to 2 processing cores in Azure. So, Microsoft is always updating and upgrading their hardware and their data centers. And definitely businesses with small on-prem data centers are not constantly updating hardware. It's expensive. So that's one of the big advantages, way different conversation. But it's important to note, just assess your physical sizes for storage and VMs and all of the things, right? So your network connections, all that stuff. And make sure you understand what's in the configuration. Don't just next and go through, read it, configure it. And that's part of the job. And, feel free, contact Marcos. We can help you.
For sure.
We can answer some questions too, right? So it's important. We do have Twitter and, Instagram and all of the social media things. So, people can reach out with questions as well. And that's
Absolutely.
part of...
Or just leave a comment below if you are watching us from YouTube. We will respond to that without any problem. But that's a very good segue to our last for this week long podcast about Azure updates. That is related to virtual machines and related to SAP. So SAP certified the new series of virtual machines that will reduce the cost and those virtual machines are memory optimized. So this is a series of the DV and the EV3 in this case, the Series 3, that announced in June 2020. So basically,
It took a few
five.
months to get
No,
that HANA certification from
exactly,
SAP.
and that
So
is the important part over here. It's not like, oh, Microsoft just released a new version of virtual machines or a new hardware for SAP. I don't know. Those virtual machines were available for any type of workloads, although they need to go through a very thoroughly process of getting certified by SAP to host SAP HANA.
that's right. Yeah.
And this
So
is a very good
SAP
way.
HANA is a special database that's used by SAP workloads, and it runs in memory. So the VMs are made specifically with SAP HANA workloads in mind. So it's very
Requirements.
memory and processor intensive,
Yeah.
and they are available for any workload. You don't have to use those with SAP, but they're now certified by SAP. So, really, I think for me, the difference is the VM is there, it's very powerful, it's ready to go. And SAP has now put the green check mark on it and said, yes, you can use these, and they will support SAP HANA workloads. And I thought some of the numbers were really cool. So
Yeah.
they talked about 2,000 order lines per hour. That's pretty impressive, really.
Yeah.
That's a lot of processing. But one of the things, and I'm going to be honest, I don't understand necessarily the measurement of SAPs, plural SAPs, but they talk about the D64DS version 4 getting 100,500 SAPs, a benchmark result that's improved over the previous model by something like 35% or something. And at the same time of improving performance, they're reducing
Costs.
by 50 to 75% depending on the model grade of VM you use.
Yeah. And we're
Yeah.
talking about VMs that in this new version that they have 64 CPUs and half of terabyte of memory.
I
So
know. It's
they are
massive.
kind of a very nice machine. I love. So I remember last time I was on the project with SAP Anna, it gave me such a pleasure just deploying 128 CPUs VMs with 500 gigs of memory. It was like, yeah, baby, let's go, let's see these. And one of those geek moments is, and I think I remember doing that. It's just open the taskbar, right? Open the processors and see how many, and counting to see if they were really
All
128.
there. It's funny. You do the same thing. I like that.
Because it's not
I know.
every day. Let's be
Yeah.
realistic. It's not
It's true.
every day
It's
that
true.
we're deploying this kind of things. But look, be able to deploy SAP Anna, it's not cheap, first of all. And be
Yeah.
able to reduce the costs, like you mentioned, and like you see right now on the screen, up to 50% on the smaller VMs or even on the larger ones, up to 55% cost reduction.
Yeah, that's a big
It's
deal for business because
yes, it
these
is.
are pricey, like you say. So you have again, so from a business perspective, we think about, you have the VM, you have also storage, then you also have licensing, data egress. So you have some different layers to think about when you build that SAP architecture, right? And certainly there's people that specialize in just SAP architecture because it can be such a big cost. What's the word I'm looking for? Cost center. If there's any kind of a misconfiguration, right? So, for me, I'm not an SAP expert, but when it comes to Azure infrastructure, we have to look at how big these things are. So,
No, exactly. And there is another thing is all of these big machines, and especially since SAP come to Azure, we're starting to see a lot of other things open up because We know that the cloud, it basically provides us with the abstraction layer, especially on the cloud, on the Azure IS, right? The infrastructure as a service is the abstraction layer of the compute, storage, and networking, right? But these machines are so big, right? And one of the things that SAP requires to come to Azure, and Azure kind of not allow them, but they kind of uh, um, make them very welcome, is you can have all of these big machines on a dedicated host in Azure. So
Hmm.
that abstraction layer, now you have dedicated hosts. You are still not managing that, but you have more secure that you don't have downtimes on this, because, like you said, having a downtime on on a SAP HANA, that is a in-memory database system and everything else. Even if you restart the machine, all the in-memory goes, because it's the
Yeah,
volatile memory, right?
exactly.
It's not where you store on that on the disk. Um, so all of that is starting to, any blimp that you have, that you are allowed to have, depending on SLA and depending on the virtual machine that you are doing, and all of that contractual good stuff, they are taking care. So they make everyone else that they want to migrate their workloads from SAP, on-prem or whatever they want, to Azure, to make way more comfortable, because it's like you're running all of those powerful machines like you're running on your infrastructure, like
Yeah.
on-prem. Although the costs, probably it's way less expensive, right? Because you
Well,
are
what,
not dealing with hardware and all of that. And I've been on
exactly,
such
right.
migrations. Oh my god! I remember last time I did a physical upgrade of SAP that I was involved, was when I was working in Portugal. So a long time ago, like 10 or 11 years ago. And it was like a project of, I don't want to, um, if memory doesn't betray me, it was like 3 or 4 months of project just to upgrade the hardware. And at
Hmm.
that time, if I'm not mistaken, we were moving from, I don't remember what was, but was from, I think it was from Linux, I don't remember, to HPUX, with the new version of hardware and everything else. So we did basically a side to side. I remember that part, a side to side. It was not even doing anything crazy. We spun up basically the the, the huge footprint of SAP beside it, and we basically starting to move the data and the services. And it was, if I'm not mistaken, a 4 months project with a lot
Yeah.
of weekends without
I can
sleeping
imagine
and all of
it
that.
would be all after hours, and
Yeah,
that means evenings, nights, and weekends, and
yeah.
that can be difficult over time, right? So three or 4 month project. It's not only tough on us, our bodies, and our minds, but it's hard on those around us, our families and friends.
And this
So,
only on the migration, because the preparation was, I don't know how many months before that.
mhm,
That was
exactly.
only the time of, and that was the impact of the company. Imagine at that time, I don't want to reveal the company, or what was the industry, but it was the main system of SAP. Usually it's the main system they have. So
Yeah.
being able to, not be able to just do this now, with all of this cost, it makes easy, because the good thing about moving this to Azure is all of that hardware, it goes away. That's
Mhm.
not up to you to
And that's what
manage.
I was thinking. So you had to do this very large upgrade to, improve performance, add more compute and more memory for SAP. Now you schedule the outage, you shut down the VM, you upgrade the VM model. You move from 64 to 128 processors, or
Like this.
256 gigs of RAM to 512 gigs of RAM. Just
Yeah.
boom, you
Boom.
reboot and away you go.
Yeah.
Begin your testing. Your upgrade is now done. So this is very impactful to large organizations and enterprises with big SAP implementations. So it is a big deal. It's interesting, right? So we talk about this last week and again this week. So we have these small updates. Azure Migrate PowerShell module. SAP has now certified these VMs for their HANA workloads.
Yeah.
These are major, major updates packed into a tiny little thing. So yeah, go read Azure blog, really important, because there can be things in
Yes.
there
Yeah.
that can really change your life.
It does. It does. So this has been one of the longest podcasts. Once again, thank you, Andrew, for being here and to just help me out and help everyone else to just talk about all of those updates. Once again, please give us thumbs up on the podcast. Subscribe if you are watching us from YouTube, because help us to just spread all of this. If you have any comment, do it below. And once again, follow the Azure Centric um, Azure Centric social media, and hope you see you next week. Once again,
Awesome.
thank you, Andrew, for that. And yeah,
Thank you for having me, Marcos.
very welcome.